everyone. Today I would be giving you some information on sampling. So, in data science, data analytics, in any research methodology, if you had to, work with data, you would have come across the term sampling. And if for people who haven't come across the word sampling, here is a bit of information. So, sampling is a statistical analysis, okay? It's a way in which a predefined number of, observations are taken from a larger population. So, now let us not go into data and understand the sampling just from a very layman's perspective. Imagine you have a basket of fruits. So, the entire basket of fruits becomes your population, and every fruit within the basket becomes an observation. Now, if you want to inspect and see whether the fruits are of good quality, you wouldn't have to, pick up every fruit and keep checking it. So the main idea here is you take a subset of the population, okay, which is indirectly predetermined number of observations, and you test only that. So if at all the sample is right or it produces certain results, it means that the other population also is of the same type. So if all the fruits that were taken out from the subset of a population, if it's going to be good, then I can assume that all the fruits in the basket are of good quality. If it's going to be bad, similarly, I can assume that the entire basket consists of bad quality fruits. So this is the very basic concept of sampling. And sampling, if you see, it's not just a very modern day theory that came up. People earlier, our ancestors, they already started using this method of sampling, whether they knew it or they didn't know what was it, but definitely sampling existed long back. So here are some examples. If you see in ancient time, you would have seen people, or even in our day-to-day lives, you would have seen people taking a handful or a few grains of rice from an entire bag of rice and checking. So if the few grains that were is tested is of good quality, people assume that the entire bag of rice is good quality. Similarly, checking fruits. So you take one grape and you check if the entire bunch of grapes is ripe. So it's not just in these little matters. This sampling carried on even to different areas and different domains. So if you see in the medical field, people take, instead of taking the testing for certain you know um, disease or anything, any test need to be done, people take a sample of blood and then they test it. So they, once a sample of blood is tested, it's assumed that the entire blood consists of those study what had been done. And then if you see in soil also, if you need to test the soil, you don't have to pick up the entire soil. A sample of soil is taken and tested. So you can actually come up with a number of examples of sampling that we can see in our day-to-day lives. So this particular method, automatically it was adopted in data. So when you had large amount of data, imagine earlier there was just limited data and people were okay working with that data, but now we live in the era of big data. There's unlimited data, there's streams of data just flowing in. So you cannot test data, each and every piece or asset of data. That's when sampling came into the picture. So you take up samples of data and then you test it, and then you assume that the entire data consists of certain aspects. So here if you see the advantages of this sampling method is, first one, it saves time. You don't have to check each and every observation in the population. You just take up a bit of a sample and then you test it. It saves much of time, and it also saves cost, overhead costs, like hiring people to analyze samples. So the lesser the sample, the very optimized the sample are, the time also is very short, and also the whole overhead, labor costs, enquiry, everything is reduced. The next one is, it's more reliable results can be obtained from this method. So by this method, you're taking a sample from the population, and since you're testing it and analyzing it, it's more reliable. Okay. The next one is, it provides more detailed information. So when you take up a sample, okay, imagine you taking a big bag of rice and you have to inspect each and every grain of rice in the bag. Okay, that is very tedious and it takes a lot of time. But when you take up just few grains of rice and you have to analyze it, you would have a lot of time to analyze it in detail. You can analyze the color of it, the texture of it, the quality of it. Okay, you can analyze for any impurities in it. You can do a very intense analysis and get out detailed information from that. So that's one of the important advantages of sampling. And also, if you see, sometimes only sampling method is dependent on upon, okay, because if you take the example of taking samples of blood, when you need to check something in your blood, it's impossible to take out the entire blood from a person. So at that time, in certain situations, sampling is the only method which proves to be very um, useful, okay, because at times when you cannot check the entire population, sampling is very useful, which is one of the advantages. The next one is administrative convenience. So the lesser the sample, the more well you'll be able to administer it, you'll be able to manage it. And the next one is more scientific. So this sampling technique, it can be proven scientifically. Okay, so that's why they say sampling is, since you can provide results and prove your theories scientifically, sampling also proves to hold good in this particular scenario. And the demerits, though there are advantages of sampling, there are sometimes demerits. And the first one is samples, they are not representative, which is also called as a sample bias. So this is a very important demerit in sampling, which I will be talking about in another video. To give you a heads up on this, sometimes your sample, it's not the very exact replica of your entire population. For example, if you take the example I showed you, a basket of fruits. The basket of fruits consists of oranges, apples, grapes, bananas, guavas, etc. But if you're just going to pick up a sample of apples and mangoes and you're going to test it and say that the entire basket consists of this, it's not valid, because the sample that you took and tested was not actually an exact representation of the basket of fruits. If you had to take one fruit of each type and test it, yes, it would have been a valid sample. But this is one of an important drawback with sampling. Samples do not represent the exact population. The next one is lack of experts to plan the sample survey. So always you just taking samples and just analyzing, it's not the exact solution. You need to plan the survey, how much of samples you need to collect, how the samples are going to be collected. There are a lot of procedures and conditions that need to be followed. Certain times when you don't have the exact expertise, you will be collecting wrong samples, you'll be analyzing wrong samples, and you'll be giving out wrong theories also about the population. So this is another drawback. The next one is sometimes it's more difficult than census method, okay? So census method is nothing but taking every observation and checking every observation. So if there are going to be 10 fruits in a basket, you will be taking all the 10 and checking. In sampling method, you'll be just taking maybe around 5 or 3 fruits. But sometimes in order to arrive at how much of sample should be collected, what type of a sample should be collected, it's very intricate and complicated. Rather, you can just test the entire, population. So there are circumstances in that which prove to be a little disadvantage. The next one is choice of your sample size. So if your sample size is not adequate enough and not right enough, then definitely it's going to give you false results. So at sometimes people do choose wrong sample size and then they make wrong conclusions, which proves to be a demerit of sampling. So these are some merits and demerits about sampling, and also I told you what sampling is and some day-to-day examples. So if this video was informative to you, of course it's little information, but if it was informative to you, please do give this video a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do subscribe to this channel, and also do share your feedbacks. Thank you.